Welcome to Muddy's Whitetail Watch. On last week's tip I was talking about the fact that the bucks have dispersed. We have to start looking for them to find them back again before we can hunt them this fall. I talked about the whole camera patterning process, or the way that you establish this inventory of bucks. This week I want to talk about what you do with those photos. We've pulled a lot of photos from the cameras, and obviously the first temptation is just to go in there and look for the biggest bucks that you've got and then figure, okay, that's the spot where I'm going to hunt. The problem with that, and what I've learned over the years, you can end up investing an awful lot of time in bucks that are not killable. And there's two reasons why a deer might not be killable. One, he may not be moving during the day. And two, he might be living in a spot that's really difficult to hunt. It might be tough to get in there and out of there without the deer knowing that you're doing it. The entry and exit routes have to be pretty much foolproof. The other thing is you may not have a wind advantage while you're in the tree hunting that specific area. So I always look for daylight activity on the cameras. I mean, obviously I want to see which mature bucks I've got on the property that I can hunt. But then my next step is I got to narrow that down to the ones that I'm going to focus on, the ones I'm going to try to pattern, the ones that I'm going to try to hunt that season. And initially it's going to be the ones that are showing up in daylight. And then the next step, of course, is to determine whether or not he's in a spot where he's huntable. And I look for, from an entry and exit route standpoint, I like spots where I can stay out of sight. Places where, whether it's a ditch that I can sneak down through, or a creek that I can use, or maybe a brushy fence line, or something that allows me to sneak into an area and sneak back out of there without the deer in the primary cover knowing that I'm there. And also, it can be really tough at the end of legal shooting time if you're hunting a food source to get out of there and get back to your vehicle without the deer in the feeding area knowing that you're there. So that's super important. It doesn't do you any good to have a big mature buck that you're hunting if you're spooking all the deer that are coming into that area just because you're coming and going, or they smell you while you're on stand. So keep those two things in mind. You've got your inventory. Now let's narrow it down to the bucks that are killable. And that can change. I mean, that's kind of a fluid thing. We keep the cameras running in the areas where we know we've got nice mature shooter bucks, because you never know when their behavior is going to change. Just because they're not moving in daylight now on the tail end of September doesn't mean that that won't change as we get into the middle of October, or even towards the end of October. And I'm going to talk a little bit next week about what we look for in October to have success. I mean, I'm a big fan of October cold fronts, and I'll talk about a lot more about that next week. So that's the strategy part. I'm going to talk about this week on my product review, the Icon cameras. And Icon is manufactured by the same company that brings you the Muddy products. They do a really nice job with this camera. It's very user-friendly. I mean, I set up 7 of them this morning before I went out to set my cameras out, and it didn't take hardly any time at all. The menu is super easy to navigate through. It's not complicated. You turn it on, you know it's going to turn on. There's not this question of, well, am I going to get a picture or not? From the testing that I've done so far, these cameras have a high degree of reliability, nice photos, and like I said, very simple operation. So we'll be showing you photos that we get from the Icon cameras over the next couple of weeks. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's the cameras that I'm using, and that they are a Muddy product. They're not a Muddy product, they're manufactured by the same company that brings you the Muddy products. So I'm going to wrap it up right there for this week. I appreciate you joining me. So we'll see you back here again next week for the next episode of Muddy's Whitetail Watch.